It's the All Things Strange podcast. I am your host, Agent Anderson. Come along as we examine UFO sightings, conspiracies, and all things strange. You can find all of our wonderful links in the description on the Linktree, where you can find our Discord, our Patreon, our merchandise, and more. This week's episode, Ley Lines. All right. Just a fair warning, somebody in the neighborhood is playing extremely loud music. Hopefully the noise removal software will take care of that. Otherwise, I will probably get sued for copyright strike and go to jail. All right, anyways, Ley Lines. This was voted upon by our Patreon subscribers. We've got 2 tiers. We are down to 2 tiers. 2 wonderful Patreon tiers for you. The first tier will get you early access and after hours. The second tier will get you the right to vote on upcoming topics such as this one. That's right, you get to choose what we do next. All right, Ley Lines. This is a little far afield of what we normally do, but people wanted it, so we're doing it. Agent ETA was supposed to come on the show. I'm not sure where he is or why he's not on. He said he was going to come on last Monday. So I'm recording this on Sunday, and he was supposed to come on last Monday and record this with me, and he has not been in contact, and I have not been able to get anything from him. So unfortunately, I do have to do this one solo, but hey, that's all right. I do have another co-host in mind, somebody who said that they want to come on the show, and somebody who I think would be excellent on the show, but we will see if that happens. I don't know if it will or not, but I will ask that person if they are interested. All right, anyways, let's get to it. Ley lines. What are they? What do they do? I'm not going to do that thing again. Ley lines are basically energy lines or energy highways that crisscross the earth. Ancient people all around the world were somehow aware of them through some means or technology that has been lost to us today, and they built structures along the lines to harness this energy, and particularly they built structures where these lines intersect. There are many different many different viewpoints, I should say, on what ley lines actually are. Are they a spiritual thing? Are they just a normal, archaeological thing? There's a lot of different viewpoints when it comes to this topic. Some people feel that the earth is a living organism and that ley lines are part of its circulatory system, kind of like blood vessels, but on a larger scale for the whole planet. This is called the Gaia hypothesis, and it's a whole other episode, but it's a pretty interesting idea. So here's a summary. The Gaia hypothesis, also known as the Gaia theory, Gaia paradigm, or the Gaia principle, proposes that living organisms interact with their inorganic surroundings on Earth to form a synergistic and self-regulating complex system that helps to maintain and perpetuate the conditions for life on the planet. The Gaia hypothesis was formulated by the chemist James Lovelock and co-developed by the microbiologist Lind Margolis in the 1970s. Following the suggestion by his neighbor, novelist William Golding, Lovelock named the hypothesis after Gaia, the primordial deity who personified the earth in Greek mythology. In 2006, the Geological Society of London awarded Lovelock the Wollaston Medal in part for his work on the Gaia hypothesis. Topics related to the hypothesis include how the biosphere and the evolution of organisms affect the stability of global temperature, salinity of seawater, atmospheric oxygen levels, the maintenance of a hydrosphere of liquid water, and other environmental variables that affect the habitability of Earth. So that's just a really quick overview, but of course, there's a lot more to it than that. But we are not here to talk about the Gaia hypothesis. We are here for the ley lines. So ley lines come in different types and shapes. Some of them are major highways of energy that cross the globe, but there are also smaller branches or local branches. So no matter where you are on the planet, you are never far from this mystical energy source. Some people believe that the powers the powers that be, want you to wear shoes with rubber soles to prevent the absorption of this earth energy. And thus the Beatles album Rubber Soul, because the Beatles were somehow in on the conspiracy, involved with some mysterious they to prevent you from wearing your shoes outside. Rubber is really good at absorbing this energy, so there you go. Conspiracy? Why not? The energy is especially powerful where ley lines intersect. So these people believe that if you take your shoes off, you can absorb this energy through your feet. And not only that, that it can cure diseases. I don't know about that, but I guess if you're sick, it can't hurt. I don't know. Don't skip your doctor's appointment, though. You know what I mean? I guess this is not a medical show. Speaking of, well, maybe I'll save that for the after hours. Anyways, in 1846, Reverend Edward Duke noticed that ancient structures were constructed in alignment with one another. And in the 1920s, Alfred Watkins was driving through the hills of Blackwardine, Herefordshire. He noticed that certain landmarks lined up. Suddenly, a cheeky idea flew into his funnel. What if it wasn't a coincidence? What if all of these things were lined up for a reason? So Alfred put on his thinking cap and got out some maps. He drew lines between different landmarks and noticed that many important sites lined up with each other, and that there were actual physical paths between things in some cases. And there were, marking stones and all sorts of interesting things that lined up. He published a book about this called The Old Straight Track in 1925. The book focused mostly on southern England. Now, you can actually get this book online. It's in the public domain. It's out there. You can just Google it and download the PDF and read it for yourself if you're interested. It's a pretty interesting book. I didn't get a chance to read the entire thing, but I did peruse it. There's some interesting quotes I wanted to share with y'all. So here is from the preface. Preface. What really matters in this book is whether it is a humanly designed fact, an accidental coincidence, or a mare's nest, that mounds, moats, beacons, and markstones fall into straight lines throughout Britain, with fragmentary evidence of trackways on the alignments. So that the fragmentary evidence of trackways, there's, like I said, paths. Often there are paths between these places, not always. The book has 129 photographs and illustrations, everything from maps to pictures of monuments and ancient structures and all sorts of really cool stuff. And here's another quote from the introduction. Knowledge is only to be gleaned from three types of evidence. Firstly and chiefly, from what exists or is recorded on or in the earth of the work or remains of man of that period. Secondly, from what can be gleaned and surmised in place names and words, for it is often forgotten that words were spoken in Britain for more centuries before they were written down than there have been centuries of written record, and there are indications that many word elements come down through both periods. Thirdly, from folklore legends, lingering fragments of fact disguised by an overlay of generations of imaginings. So, I mean, that's just kind of where he's coming from, and that's how he's looking at his evidence. But in other words, Alfred believed that there were routes or roads along the lines, hence ley lines. I believe he is the one who coined that term. And he thought it was trade routes or something like that. Interestingly, the sites involved were built throughout history. Everything from structures built in prehistoric times up to medieval times. So they weren't all built at the same time. Why would structures built during different times all line up? Well, he makes some arguments for that, but you'll have to read the book for that. But basically, he thinks that if somebody's using a path, they will continue to use it, is one of his ideas. Looking through all of the drawings and photographs and perusing the book, there definitely does seem to be some sort of alignment going on here. I mean, it's not just made up. At least in southern England, where this book focuses on, stuff really does seem to be built in lines. It's kind of weird. Coincidence? I don't know. Is there some reason they were built like this? Who knows? Obviously, it wasn't planned like this. If they were built at different time periods, then they didn't necessarily get together and plan it with each other, right? All right, there's another section about other places in the world. Here's a quote. There is evidence that the cited straight track is in use in other parts of the world today. In Sir Harry Johnston's Uganda, he refers to the broad native roads made as straight as possible, for their mark, like the roads of the Romans, seem to pick out preferentially the highest and steepest hills, which they ascend perpendicularly and without compromise. So that's basically, in a nutshell, the book. This book is where modern ley lines come from. That's where the idea comes from, is from that book. In a travel article in Blackwood's magazine from February 1923, talking about a district in India, here's a quote. Like all Chen tracks, regardless of gradients, it followed the most direct line between villages. Chen prefers a steep climb to a level road. I'm not sure what Chen is in this context, but just another little quote there about ley lines. But as far as I can tell, looking through the book, Alfred was just talking about trade routes and did not interpret ley lines as having any sort of hidden mystical or energetic power. They were just trade routes or paths or lines. There are a few places where one might make some interpretations that I saw. For example, here's a quote. No student of the ley, seeing how on the map ancient homesteads with ancient names seem drawn to the line like iron fillings to a line of magnetic influence, can doubt that these also were planted on mark points of the disused track. So, I mean, the bit there about saying that the tracks look like iron fillings to a line of magnetic influence, it seems like he's kind of hinting at something more, but I think that's just an interpretation. From what I can tell, it does not appear that Alfred intended energy lines, just the trade routes. This quote, it's just a simile, kind of like a metaphor, but with like or as. He didn't mean that it was actually a line of magnetic influence. All right, the book was well received in its day, The Straight Track. It was well received in its day by some people, but it was rejected by mainstream archaeologists. And back in this day, I guess in a lot of places, particularly in southern England, they didn't have like a very strong academic program for archaeology. It was mostly just amateurs. Now, if I'm wrong about that, please correct me, but that's my impression that I got reading through some of this stuff. And it wasn't until later on when they started getting, really good funding for archaeology in the universities, when they had better academic stuff going on. But back in his day, in Alfred's day, it was basically just amateurs who had the means. So basically people with a little extra cheddar and a little extra free time were able to investigate these things. So yeah, his ideas were more or less dismissed by his contemporaries. They said things like the sites were built at different times and therefore unlikely to have trade routes between them. Also, a lot of the routes didn't make sense because they went over mountains and hills in a way that, if you were building a road, you would have maybe gone around the mountains and hills. So it didn't really make sense that you would go up a steep hill or mountain, especially if you didn't have a car, you're just using horses or just walking or something. He did address concerns such as these, or those specific ones and more in his book, but I don't necessarily need to go over all of his arguments. There is an appendix in his book titled Ley Hunting, and indeed, a ley hunting club was formed, and it was active until the outbreak of World War II, when, the entire world changed. Everybody's life was upended in England at the very least, and people did not have as much time or inclination to be in a club wandering the countryside looking for ley lines, ley hunting. Independently of Alfred Watkins, the idea of heilige linen or holy lines was developed in Germany, but that's kind of a separate topic and comes from a different sort of a different viewpoint, I should say. So after the war, the idea of ley lines kind of died down. They just sort of went away for a while. But in the 1960s, it was brought back with a more spiritual interpretation. Now, for those of you unaware, of course, this was before I was born, but the 1960s in the United States, and I'm guessing England, I don't know about other places, but you had the hippie counterculture going on, and everybody was on a lot of drugs. Well, I shouldn't say everybody, but there was a lot of people on a lot of drugs, particularly things like LSD. So, maybe that was a contributing factor towards this spiritual movement. And I'm not saying these people are crazy necessarily, but I have heard of people who take hallucinogens expanding their consciousness. I've never taken LSD, so I can't say myself how expanding this might be. But I have heard stories where people who, independently of each other, people will tell stories about seeing, beings from other dimensions and things like that. And there are enough similarities to the stories to kind of make me wonder if there's anything to it. Are we somehow able to take a peek into an alternate dimension, or perhaps see lines of energy that are normally invisible to us? Who knows? I don't know. Maybe I should go take some LSD and find out, right? Am I right? The idea came about that lines weren't simply trade routes. After all, many of the things that line up in space didn't line up in time. Rather, ancient people understood something about our world that we have forgotten. They knew about lines of power and built structures on these lines to harness the power. Pyramids, for instance. Many people believe that the pyramids in Egypt were not just tombs, but were built to harness energy. Some of them do have strange elements to their structures. We did a 2-part episode on the pyramids, so we talked about some of that stuff. In 1961, Tony Wedd published Skyways and Landmarks, a book in which he proposed that ley lines were also used to guide alien spacecraft, or maybe magnetic currents. The lines were built on the magnetic currents, and UFOs also followed the currents. I don't know, something like that. Maybe I should read the book. It doesn't really seem to make a whole lot of sense to me. I'm not gonna read the book. I probably should. I mean, just think like, if aliens can come all the way here from there, they're not going to need magnetic lines on the surface of the Earth to find their way around. They will have some far more advanced means of navigation. Anyways, Tony's book influenced John Mitchell, who wrote a book called The Flying Saucer Vision, which was published in 1967. Mitchell borrowed some of Tony's ideas, but added a new twist. extraterrestrials had helped man build structures along the ley lines. In other words, he was talking about the ancient astronaut or ancient alien theory. I'm sure you're all familiar, but it's the idea that aliens had contact with ancient people and did things like helping them build the pyramids, forming religions, enslaving populations, and stuff like that. It's a cool topic and it's on the list. Maybe I'll put it to vote pretty soon here. I don't know if I'm totally convinced or not, but it's still really fun just to say what if. The biggest name in the field is probably Eric von Daniken. If you want to look up stuff, he's written several books, but there are others. Anyways, back to Mitchell. He proposed that aliens used to live on Earth and were worshipped by people, but they left when people changed and became too materialistic. If people could only chill out, man, and activate some of these ancient sites, then aliens would come back and everything would be good. Or something like that. Mitchell published another book in 1969, The View Over Atlantis. He elaborated on some ideas from his previous book. He talked about dragon veins, which I'll talk about those briefly later. And he said that an ancient civilization had spanned the world. This civilization was able to detect ley lines and built along the lines of energy to harness the Earth's power. Soon, according to Mitchell, the age of Aquarius would bring back ancient knowledge to modern people. Hey, they even wrote a song about it, The Age of Aquarius. Age of Aquarius song. This is like hippie central music right here. What is this? So who it is? It's actually not a bad song, but it's a song that would definitely piss off Cartman. So Aquarius / Let the Sunshine In, commonly called Aquarius Let the Sunshine In or The Age of Aquarius or Let the Sunshine In, is a medley of two songs written for the 1967 musical Hair by James Ratto and Jerome Ragney. Oh, no kidding. I didn't know it was for Hair. I haven't seen Hair, but I've heard of it. So it was recorded by session musicians, etc., etc. Oh, that's interesting. I did not know that. Anyways, moving right along from the little musical diversion there. That was actually a belief by some people, is that we were in the age of, I think it was Pisces. I'd have to refer to that. And, age of Pisces is it basically sucks. It's bullshit. Everybody's unhappy. But we were soon going to enter the age of Aquarius. And that would bring back ancient knowledge to modern people. And everything would be good. Mitchell's book did lead to another ley line hunting club. Basically, they went around looking for ley lines. That sounds like a fun time to me. Get together with your buddies, have a couple beers, wander around the countryside with some dowsing rods, just goofing around. I probably wouldn't take it as serious as some people, but it sounds like a lot of fun, actually. So there was more interest from the public. There were more books, magazines, and other things that followed. At this point, we now have the modern idea of ley lines solidified. That is, that they are lines of energy, not just trade routes or whatever. There are different ideas about exactly what they are. Things like UFO highways, structures to capture energy, structures to direct energy. So either the ley lines are being directed or they're being captured. Mother Gaia's circulatory system, integration into religious beliefs such as paganism or Druidism, and more. There's quite a variety of beliefs surrounding the topic. There was pretty serious interest in ley lines all through the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. Some people still tried to take a scientific approach and tested areas for things like radiation and infrasound or ultrasound at certain sites to see if they could detect any sort of, anomalous signatures or something unusual. They didn't find anything anomalous or conclusive. They found some sites would have variations in radiation, but nothing like it wasn't like at every single suspected ley line they found elevated or depressed radiation levels. Because if they did, that would have been really, really interesting and, worthy of further study. But they didn't. They didn't find anything. They didn't detect anything. But on the other hand, that's not really all that surprising because if these are energy highways, there is a chance that it's a type of energy that we have not yet learned how to detect. That's kind of part of the idea anyways. So eventually, by about the 2000s, early 2000s, interest in ley lines began to kind of wane. They started to go away. Ley hunters in England were almost gone by this point. There were still people that believed in them and the spiritual side of ley lines, but any serious attempt to find and map them or to scientifically detect them or anything like that was pretty much gone. By this point, it had been relegated almost entirely to more or less what you could describe as a religious type belief system. I think New Age would probably be the closest thing. And I'm not sure if New Age people believe in ley lines or not, but, something along those lines. Skeptics point out that ley lines are merely bullocks. But where's the fun in that, I ask you? That is no fun at all. Other cultures have ideas similar to ley lines. This is not unique to southern England. For example, as mentioned earlier, dragon veins. This is an idea from Feng Shui from China. Probably saying that wrong, but anyways, here's a definition from the American Heritage Dictionary. The Chinese art or practice of positioning. This is the definition for Feng Shui or Feng Shui. I don't know. Whatever. Fengshui. You guys know what I'm talking about. Feng Shui. No, that's not right either. Anyways, 1. The Chinese art or practice of positioning objects, especially graves, buildings, and furniture, based on a belief in patterns of yin and yang and the flow of qi that have positive and negative effects. 2. An ancient Chinese system of designing buildings and space arrangement according to special rules about the flow of energy, aimed at achieving harmony with the environment. 3. In Chinese mythology, a system of spiritual energies, both good and evil, present in the natural feature of landscapes. So that's Feng Shui, and I don't know that much about it, but I know it's an ancient system, and I've heard about it before. And, I've seen it referenced before, sort of casually, although I don't know what it is. Some people compare Feng Shui to geomancy or, quote, earth divination. And this is a little bit about earth divination. The term was originally used to mean methods of divination that interpret geographic features, markings on the ground, or patterns formed by soil, rocks, or sand. Its definition has expanded over time, along with the recognized definition of the suffix mancy to include any spiritual, metaphysical, or pseudoscientific practice that is related to the earth. In recent times, the term has been applied to a wide range of other occult and fringe activities, including earth mysteries and the introduction of ley lines and baubiologie. So, there's some really interesting stuff in there. I would love to do an episode about geomancy or earth divination. That would be a really cool topic. Earth mysteries would be a really cool topic. In fact, let me put these on the list, so bear with me here. I'll be right back. Through the magic of editing, you guys won't have to deal with any break at all here. Boom, I'm back. Back, baby. All right, yeah, so they're pretty similar to dragon veins and stuff. It's a whole lot older. The idea of Feng Shui is a whole lot older than ley lines, going back thousands of years to ancient China. And dragon veins are paths of energy or qi, QI, that flow underground through mountains. They may concentrate in caverns, and it's a really bad idea to destroy them. How you would destroy them? I don't know, but it's bad to do so, so try not to. Whatever, however that is. And yeah, again, Feng Shui is a whole other episode, but there's a little bit of similarity to ley lines. I found that really interesting. Like the belief systems are pretty similar. And it's Mitchell did mention dragon veins, so it's not clear exactly how influential they were on him, but it wouldn't surprise me if a lot of ideas from the 70s about ley lines were actually heavily influenced or originated from the ideas of Feng Shui. That would make a lot of sense because they are extremely similar in some ways. Now, although the idea of ley lines originated in England, they've been applied to places all over the world. And it turns out that many places across the globe, built at different times in history, all line up with each other. Or do they? Let's take a look at some maps and see what's what. Now, already there's a problem when you're looking at these maps because when people are drawing ley lines on maps, some people draw curved lines to match the surface of the earth. Other people draw straight lines, and critics said that straight lines are stupid because they don't make any sense, because in order for it to be straight, it needs to be curved because the earth is curved. However, that also assumes that lines travel on the surface of the earth in a straight path. It's possible that the path isn't straight, or that the points are connected by traveling under the surface of the earth, or any number of other things that might actually make sense to draw a straight line on the map on a curved surface, basically. I mean, if anything's plausible, we don't know. And at this point with ley lines, it's all just speculation anyways. We're just asking, what if, right? And I think I mentioned earlier, the junctions where they intersect are supposed to be the strongest energy. And that might be, what if that's the strongest energy? Because that's where the energy comes to the surface. So they're traveling underneath the surface in a straight line from point to point. So then they could go in straight lines. I don't know, just hypothesizing here. And perhaps another idea I had was that maybe ley lines are not confined to the three spatial dimensions as we understand them. Maybe it's like dark matter or dark energy, something that we don't know how to detect and we don't know what it is. So if you look at the maps, you can see that ley lines have been drawn all over the place. I mean, any monument or ancient structure or church or anything is probably on a ley line somewhere. And depending on who you're asking, ley lines might not necessarily even go all the way around from somewhere to somewhere. Some people say that they come down from the sky, they go for a little bit, and then they leave down through the ground. So they might not even necessarily connect with anything. But I've seen maps where they draw ley lines on local areas or like on a smaller scale, but they're also drawn out on larger scale maps. So you have regional, continental, global. So we can't look at all of the maps in detail all over the world for this episode. There's just way too much. But let's take just a look at just a couple of them to see what's going on here. So one of the interesting ones I looked at was Stonehenge. Everyone has heard of Stonehenge, I'm sure, but we don't actually know that much about it. We don't know exactly who built it, when it was built, or what it was for. There are many theories that usually come down to religion, but we don't know for sure, and it was probably used by different people for different purposes throughout history. But in general, it's thought that it was built, or at least construction began, somewhere around 3000 BC and was probably constructed over many years. It lines up to the solstice and equinox, and people think that it was some sort of astronomical observatory. Modern-day Druids worship there, but it's unknown if it was used by Druids in the past. The stones come from up to 150 miles away, and not all of the stones came from the same place. Some came from just 20 miles away, which is still an insane distance to move giant stones without any sort of modern machinery. That's still 20 miles is really far. Go walk 20 miles tomorrow and you'll find that it's not that easy to do. It's a pretty far walk. It's doable. I've walked 20 miles. Have I? I don't know, probably at some point. But it's not ideal. It's a lot of walking. So why would they source material from that far away? I mean, imagine just walking 20 miles, let alone carrying a multiple ton, big giant stone. That seems pretty impractical. There had to be a reason, but we can only speculate. It's not clear how they got them there, how they had the technology to move them, how they had the technology to carve and excavate them. There are theories, there are tools that have been found, but to my understanding, the picture for Stonehenge is still very incomplete. The site itself reminds me a little bit of Göbekli Tepe, which was built well before Stonehenge. Stonehenge was built about 5,000 years ago, and Göbekli Tepe was built about 7,000 years before Stonehenge. Wrap your head around that. From us to Stonehenge is a shorter period than it was from Stonehenge to Göbekli Tepe. That is just insane. We talked about that in our episode in Göbekli Tepe. I think it was like episode 3. It was one of the early ones, but it's a fascinating site. If you haven't heard that, I recommend you go back and listen to it because Göbekli Tepe is really interesting, and it kind of turned our idea of ancient history on its head. But another interesting thing about Göbekli Tepe is that it was backfilled on purpose. So it was really well preserved compared to Stonehenge, where the stones are really, really worn out. And who knows, maybe there were also bas relief carvings on Stonehenge and they're just gone, just worn out from being weathered for 5,000 years, right? I don't know. Is that possible? Who knows? Maybe someday somebody can do some sort of, muon photography and see if the stone has any trace evidence of being carved into or something. I don't know. Would that even work? Who knows? I don't even know what a muon is. Is that a subatomic particle? Maybe. Maybe not. I don't know. Anyways, I don't want to go into too much detail on Stonehenge. It's probably a whole episode on itself. It's a fascinating place, and I encourage everybody to read up on it. I read up on it a little bit when I was looking into this episode, and it's really, really fascinating. But anyways, there are hundreds and hundreds of nearby ancient structures, and people have drawn lines on Stonehenge, not just like locally, like they draw them around the Stonehenge itself, but they've also drawn lines from Stonehenge to other local monuments. And it seems to me that some of them do seem to line up, like I said earlier, but I don't know. Who knows for sure? I mean, it could just be a coincidence, I guess. All right, so you're probably wondering, how are ley lines found? Some are identified by people citing them by eyeball, just looking at the landscape. Other people will look at stuff on a map and draw lines on a map. Other people will use dowsing rods to find them, as I mentioned earlier. Well, Agent Anderson, you ask, isn't dowsing a bunch of poppycock? Well, first, poppies don't have cocks, and second, even if it is, maybe it's not. I don't think that mundane metal sticks can somehow detect lines of energy or water under the ground, but maybe, perhaps, somehow we can detect these things either subconsciously or with some kind of sixth sense. We can detect the energy in ley lines. I spoke before about the vortices in Sedona and how I was really surprised that I actually felt something there. I felt an energy there. And that I was completely floored by that because I'm normally pretty skeptical about that kind of stuff. But I did sense some kind of energy. And again, as I said, it might have been some kind of subconscious suggestion. It might have been imaginary, but I definitely noticed something. So maybe there is some way that some people can detect ley lines through psychic means or otherwise. And the dowsing rods are just a tool for them to help identify those areas. So maybe dowsing rods are not 100% useless after all. I don't know. Maybe I should do an episode on dowsing. In fact, let me put that on the list. Hey, you know what? Here's the thing. If I get an idea for an episode that I think might be interesting, I have to put it on the list because otherwise I'll forget about it like in 30 seconds. So I wanted to put it on the list right away before I forgot about it. So it's thought that 14 different ley lines converge on Stonehenge, making it an extremely powerful place for earth energy. And I guess that's pretty much all I had to say about Stonehenge. There's a lot more details I could go into, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about what it was, how old it was, and a little bit about the ley line convergence. But it's hard to talk more about the alignments without having a map to show you guys. Maybe in the future, if I ever get my crap together, I'll start doing video podcasts again. I really need to start doing that. But anyways, in the meantime, you'll just have to look it up yourself. So probably the most interesting ley line map I found, or at least one that really caught my attention, was a map of the Great Lakes area in North America on the border of the United States and Canada. For anybody not familiar, the Great Lakes are huge. They look like the ocean from their shores. I've never been there, but I've seen pictures. For example, Lake Superior is the largest of the Great Lakes, and it is also the largest freshwater lake in the world. In fact, it has 10% of the world's freshwater by surface area. 10%. Wrap your head around that. It borders 3 U.S. states, Minnesota, Michigan, and Wisconsin, and Ontario, Canada as well. Its surface area is almost 32,000 square miles, or about the same size as South Carolina or Australia. South Carolina. Guess what, guys? I'm going to South Carolina soon. Maybe I'll put that maybe I'll talk about that in the after hours. I'm doing an after hours this time, I promise. Last time, let's see. Hold on, put a notation here. All right. So yes, I promise I will do an after hours this time. Apologies for that. And I'll talk about why I did not do one last time. It's a short explanation. All right. So anyways, the Great Lakes area, Lake Superior, 10% of the world's freshwater by area, and its surface area, 32,000 square miles. I already said that. South Carolina, Austria. I wonder if the Great Lakes have a monster. There has to be a Lake Superior monster. Superior monster. You'd think there would definitely be one, but yeah. Mishapeshu, the underwater panther in Lake Superior. Awesome. I have to look this up later. It's definitely going on the list, but I'm not going to go on any diversions for that right now. I figured, hey, the largest body of fresh water in the world has to have a monster, right? So anyways, the Great Lake area is really neat, and I hope to get to visit it someday. I've never been there, but Ether went there for work reasons, but I have not had a chance myself. She was in Michigan, I believe. Anyways, I found a really cool ley line map of the Great Lakes area where the points cross to form a pentagram. The bottom left point is Chicago, and this connects to the right at Niagara Falls and to the left at Duluth. The other 2 points don't seem to have anything marked. They're just sort of in the middle of nowhere, but there's probably something cool there. Who knows? I couldn't tell by the map. I mean, I didn't see anything, but I don't know. If you live in one of those points, let me know. So if you connect all the points around the edges and through the middle, you get a pentagram. Of course you do, because why not? Smack dab in the middle of the pentagram is a place called Sault Ste. Marie in Michigan. It seems like a really cool place, but I looked into it a little bit. It didn't seem to have anything unusual about it, but who knows? There have been a couple of VIPs from the area, like Taffy Abel, who was a professional hockey player between 1926 and 1934. He had a great career and ended up in the Hall of Fame, but that's a different story. And athletes come from lots of different places. So, it didn't really seem remarkable in any way. It looks like they have held a yearly paranormal convention there, the Michigan Paranormal Convention, and it just happened in August. And unfortunately, I saw that was going to be the last one. So I will never get a chance to go because it's not there anymore. But there will be other conventions of similar types, I'm sure. There are also some paranormal ghost hunting groups in the area, and the area is on the convergence of like three of the Great Lakes, it kind of looks like. So it could be a strange place, but looking into it briefly, I couldn't really find anything super unusual about it. So why it would be in the middle of this pentagram, what does that mean? When somebody summons Satan up from the depths of hell, is this where he's going to emerge? I don't know. So that was kind of an interesting one. Just, on the map, somebody drew that, and it's probably nothing, but it's still pretty cool just to look at it and wonder what if there really is something to all this. There's another ley line. This is probably the most famous one that goes straight through southern England. Probably the most famous ley line. It's called the St. Michael Alignment. And here's just a quote from bigthink.com. It runs in a straight line between Land's End, England, southwestern extremity, and Hopton-on-Sea, on the Norfolk coast. Its name derives from the many sites devoted to St. Michael that it touches or skirts on its 350-mile course, and from its orientation, the direction of the sunrise on May 8th, when the Latin liturgy celebrates the apparition of St. Michael. So yeah, it passes through some pretty interesting points, such as the Avebury Henge, Oliver's Castle, and the Hurlers. I won't talk about all of those because it's a little far afield, but I must mention the Avebury Henge because it's really cool. Here's a quick summary from Wikipedia. Avebury is a Neolithic henge monument containing 3 stone circles around the village of Avebury in Wiltshire in southwest England. One of the best known prehistoric sites in Britain, it contains the largest megalithic stone circle in the world. It is both a tourist attraction and a place of religious importance to contemporary pagans. Constructed over several hundred years in the 3rd millennium BC, during the Neolithic or New Stone Age, the monument comprises a large henge, a bank and a ditch, with a large outer stone circle and 2 separate smaller stone circles situated inside the center of the monument. Its original purpose is unknown, although archaeologists believe that it was most likely used for some form of ritual ceremony. Isn't that what they always say? The Avebury Monument is a part of a larger prehistoric landscape containing several older monuments nearby, including West Kennet Long Barrow, Windmill Hill, and Silbury Hill. Yeah, that's what they always say. Oh, it must have been religion. But I mean, what if, in many years from now, somebody finds the Statue of Liberty? They're going to be like, big giant statue. How tall is it? Like 300 feet tall or something? Big giant 300-foot tall statue? Probably religion, That's, what they say about everything. They find New York City right next to it with all these crazy buildings. That's probably religion. Everything's religion. Why not? It's the easy answer, isn't it? So there are many, many other ley lines and maps, many very interesting things to look at. I didn't have time to really look at all of them because there's just too many of them. But check out maps.leylines.net. That's leylines.net. It's a really cool interactive tool where you can look around the globe, draw your own ley lines, look at lines that other people have drawn. It's really pretty neat. All right. Anyways, that's all I've got for you this time around on Ley Lines. I was hoping for ETA to come on because this is definitely in his wheelhouse. I'm more of the UFO guy, so this one is less in my wheelhouse. Apologies for that. I tried to give it my best effort anyways. I tried to give it a fair shake and talk about it, but it's just not it's not the thing that I normally talk about. This isn't my sort of usual topic, right? I'm kind of the UFO guy. But final thoughts, do other planets or even moons also have ley lines? Or is it something unique to Earth? Or is it just because Earth is an organism? Is Jupiter an organism? Does Jupiter have ley lines? I don't know. What about that weird hexagon on the pole of Saturn? That's weird. Is that something to do with ley lines? I don't know. I really like the idea of ley lines. I find it fascinating. I don't know if they're real or not. For me, I haven't experienced them myself. I haven't experienced lines of energy like this. For me, it's not necessarily even a matter of if it's true or if it's not true. I just find the idea fascinating. So that's kind of why I like covering this topic. It's just a really cool and interesting idea. And sometimes I like to take a step back and ask, what if? I mean, many world monuments do seem to line up, but on the other hand, it is possible to just draw lines between different points and get some pretty interesting results, like the pentagram in the Great Lakes area. Maybe it's because people, knowingly or not, tend to build things on nexus points of energy. Maybe it's just subconscious and you don't even know why you're choosing the point. I don't know. It's a fun topic to speculate about, and I could go on and on, but that's pretty much all I have for you this time. All right. Thank you guys so much for listening, and keep it strange.